Three men grabbed the stranger by his jacket. "You're not leaving alive." Before the first punch could land, a curvy woman rushed between them, wrapped both arms around the stranger's neck, and kissed him without warning. The street froze. She turned toward the stunned men, her heart pounding, but her smile unwavering. "Touch my husband," she said, "and you'll answer to me first." The stranger's lips curved into the faintest smile. She had no idea she had just kissed the city's most feared mafia boss. The rain continued to fall long after the three men disappeared around the corner. Harper Ellison remained frozen where she stood, still close enough to feel the stranger's steady breathing. Only when she realized her hands were still resting against his shoulders did she stumble backward, her cheeks burning hotter than the summer sun ever could. "Oh my goodness." She covered her mouth. I'm so sorry." The stranger looked at her without speaking. The silence only made her more flustered. "I know that probably looked completely insane," she rushed on. "I wasn't trying to, well, I was trying to kiss you, obviously, but only because they were about to hurt you." She winced. That sounded even worse. For a heartbeat, she considered running all the way back to her flower shop and pretending none of this had ever happened. Instead, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I just thought if they believed we were married, they'd hesitate. Sometimes people back off when they think someone's watching." The stranger finally spoke. It worked. His voice was calm, deep, controlled, not the voice of a frightened man who had narrowly escaped a beating. Harper blinked. "You're surprisingly relaxed." "I've had worse evenings." That answer caught her off guard. She laughed, despite herself. "Well, I certainly hope not, because this evening has been stressful enough for both of us." For the first time, the corners of his mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a full smile. More like the memory of one. "You laugh after frightening experiences." "I usually do," Harper admitted with a shrug. "Otherwise, I'd spend my whole life panicking." The stranger studied her carefully. Most people who looked into his eyes saw danger before anything else. She seemed to see only another exhausted human being standing in the rain. "What made you interfere?" he asked. "You didn't know me. I didn't need to." She answered so naturally that it almost sounded obvious. "I saw several men surrounding one person. They were angry. You weren't fighting back. That was enough. You assumed I was innocent." "No." The unexpected honesty surprised him. "I assumed," she continued, "that no one deserves to be beaten in the middle of the street before anyone even knows the truth." For reasons Damian himself could not explain, those words lingered longer than they should have. Most people judged first. She had chosen compassion first. An unusual choice. Perhaps even a dangerous one. "You could have been hurt," he said quietly. "I know. You still ran toward us. I know that too." Harper rubbed the back of her neck and smiled sheepishly. "My brain usually catches up about 5 minutes after my feet make a decision." A soft breath escaped him. Not quite laughter. Closer than he had come in years. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, while the city slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Harper glanced toward the corner where the men had vanished. "They won't come back, will they?" No. His certainty settled over the street, with quiet authority. She noticed it. She simply assumed he was unusually confident. "Good," she sighed, "because I don't think I could pull off pretending to be your wife twice in one evening." That almost earned another smile. Almost. She extended her hand. "I'm Harper, by the way. Harper Ellison." He looked at her hand for a brief moment before taking it. His grip was warm. "Steady. Damian? No last name?" "It isn't important." She tilted her head. "Mysterious. So I've been told." She chuckled again. "You know, Damian, Mysterious men usually buy someone coffee after they've been unexpectedly kissed and unexpectedly rescued. Especially then. For a moment he actually considered accepting, a strange impulse, one he rarely indulged. Instead, he glanced toward the waiting black sedan parked across the street. His security team had wisely stayed hidden during the confrontation, trusting his judgment rather than intervening too early. I have somewhere I need to be. Of course. Harper tried not to sound disappointed. Well, I'm glad you're all right. She turned to leave before stopping once more. Oh, and if anyone ever asks, she pointed playfully at him. We were never married. I'll remember. She smiled one last time before hurrying toward the warm lights of her little flower shop. Damian remained where he was, watching until she disappeared behind the glass door. Only then did one of his bodyguards approach. Boss, should we investigate her? Damian kept his eyes on the flower shop window. No. The answer came without hesitation. Leave her completely alone. He paused. Then, almost to himself, he added, for the first time in many years, someone helped me without wanting anything in return. For the next 3 days, Harper convinced herself she would never see Damian again. People crossed paths in cities every day. They shared buses, sidewalks, elevators, and sometimes strange moments that became amusing stories to tell years later. A kiss between strangers in the rain certainly qualified as one of those stories. So when the little brass bell above her flower shop door chimed late Thursday morning, she looked up with the same cheerful smile she offered every customer. It faltered for half a second. Damian stood in the doorway. Gone was the damp stranger in a wrinkled jacket. Today he wore a charcoal suit, tailored so perfectly it seemed stitched onto him. Yet despite the polished appearance, there was something unmistakably familiar about the calm eyes watching her from across the room. Harper folded her arms. Please don't tell me you're here because you forgot we're divorced. A faint crease appeared at the corner of Damian's mouth. I thought we agreed we were never married. Good. I didn't want to split imaginary property. That tiny crease deepened. Not quite a smile, but dangerously close. He glanced around the cozy flower shop. Buckets overflowed with fresh roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender. Warm sunlight spilled through the front window, making the colorful bouquets seem almost alive. It smells peaceful here, he said. It usually is. Flowers don't argue, unless someone forgets to water them. She reached for a bundle of white tulips. So, buying flowers? Yes. 4. He hesitated. I hadn't thought that far. Harper laughed. You walked into a flower shop without knowing who the flowers were for. It appears so. She shook her head in theatrical disbelief. You really are hopeless. His security chief, Lucas, waited discreetly outside the shop and nearly choked on his coffee. No one, absolutely no one, had ever called Damian Vale hopeless and lived to repeat it. Inside, Damian simply nodded. What would you recommend? Harper circled the display, studying him instead of the flowers. You don't seem like red roses. Why not? Too predictable. She picked up a bundle of blue irises. These, what do they mean? Trust. He looked at the flowers for a long moment. I'll take them. She wrapped the bouquet in brown paper with practiced hands. That'll be $28. Damian reached into his wallet and placed several $100 bills on the counter. Harper stared. So, he waited. Are we buying the shop? I don't have smaller bills. She pushed the money back. Then there's a bakery across the street. Buy yourself a muffin. They'll solve your change problem. He actually considered doing exactly that. 5 minutes later, he returned, carrying an untouched blueberry muffin and enough smaller bills to pay properly. Harper blinked. You really went. You told me to. I was joking. I know. For the first time, she heard the unmistakable hint of dry humor in his voice. She laughed so hard, she had to lean against the counter. "You know what your problem is?" "What?" "You're accidentally funny." "I wasn't trying to be." Exactly. That somehow made it even better. Over the following weeks, Damian kept finding reasons to visit. Sometimes he bought flowers. Sometimes he asked impossible questions. What flower survives the longest? What flower apologizes best? What flower says thank you without sounding dramatic? Harper always had an answer. She claimed flowers had their own language. He claimed she was making half of it up. She insisted all florists possessed secret botanical wisdom. He pretended to believe her. The conversations became the favorite part of both their days, though neither admitted it. One rainy afternoon, she caught him studying a tiny cactus near the register. "You've been staring at that poor thing for almost a minute. It seems resilient. It survives because people forget to water it. I respect that." She picked it up and handed it to him. "Congratulations." "For what?" "You've officially chosen the plant with the least romantic reputation in history." "I wasn't looking for romance." "No?" "No." She smiled mischievously. "That's exactly what someone accidentally finding romance would say." For the first time, Damian laughed. Not politely, not quietly. A genuine laugh escaped before he could stop it. The sound surprised both of them. Harper simply stared. "There you are." "What?" The real smile. His expression softened almost immediately. "I don't smile often." "I noticed. It serves little purpose." "I disagree." She pointed at him. "You smiled for 3 whole seconds." "And?" The entire shop got brighter. He looked around at the flowers. "I think that was them." She shook her head. "No, it was definitely you." For reasons neither of them understood. Neither wanted to be the first to end the conversation. Outside, Lucas glanced at his watch for the 3rd time. Inside, the world's most feared mafia boss was listening, completely captivated, as a florist passionately explained why sunflowers always looked optimistic. And for the first time in years, Damian realized he was inventing excuses to return to a place where no one feared him, only expected him to smile a little more than yesterday. By the beginning of autumn, Damian had become a familiar face at Harper's flower shop. He never announced when he was coming. He simply appeared. Sometimes early in the morning, before his meetings. Sometimes late in the afternoon, after the city had begun winding down. Sometimes he stayed only 5 minutes. Other times an entire hour slipped by, without either of them noticing. Harper had stopped asking why. If he wanted flowers, she sold him flowers. If he wanted conversation, she happily provided that too. She still knew almost nothing about him, and strangely, she didn't mind. One Tuesday afternoon, Harper delivered floral arrangements to a fundraising luncheon at one of the city's most prestigious hotels. It was the kind of place where polished marble reflected crystal chandeliers, and every guest seemed to recognize everyone else. After arranging the centerpieces, she prepared to leave when a familiar voice caught her attention. "Good afternoon, Harper." She turned. Damian stood near the entrance, in another impeccably tailored suit. "You clean up nicely," she teased. He glanced down at himself. "I was under the impression I usually did." She laughed. "I meant nicer than usual. I'll accept that correction." Before she could say another word, something unexpected happened. A group of executives hurried across the ballroom. Their conversations stopped the instant they reached Damian. Each greeted him with quiet respect. One elderly businessman even straightened his posture before extending his hand. "Mr. Vale," he said carefully, "it's an honor to see you again." Damian shook his hand with effortless composure. "The pleasure is mine." Another executive immediately excused himself from an ongoing conversation, just to acknowledge Damian's arrival. Within moments, Several influential guests had gathered around him. No one interrupted him. No one spoke over him. Even the hotel's general manager personally appeared to welcome him. Harper watched from across the room. Her playful smile slowly faded into curiosity. She had assumed Damian worked in business. But this felt different. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't simple professional courtesy. It was something closer to instinctive respect. As if everyone understood, he carried a kind of authority that required no explanation. Later that afternoon, after the luncheon ended, Damian found Harper waiting outside beside her delivery van. She folded her arms dramatically. "I have questions. I suspected you might." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you secretly famous?" "No." "Rich?" He considered the question. "Comfortable." She rolled her eyes. People who describe themselves as comfortable usually own buildings. He said nothing. "You're not going to deny it." "It depends." "On what?" "Whether denying it would accomplish anything." She sighed theatrically. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." They began walking together toward her flower shop. The city buzzed around them with its usual rhythm, yet Harper couldn't stop replaying what she had witnessed. The executives, the manager, the effortless deference. "You know," she said after a long silence, "those people looked nervous around you." "I noticed." "You noticed?" "They often are. You say that like it's normal." "For me, it is." She studied his profile. He wasn't arrogant. If anything, he sounded faintly tired, as though being watched and carefully measured had become an ordinary part of his life. "Doesn't it bother you?" she asked. "Sometimes. Then why not tell them to relax? They wouldn't believe me." Harper thought about that. Oddly enough, she believed he was right. A week later, she experienced something even stranger. Damian invited her to lunch at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. The owner himself greeted Damian at the entrance, not with exaggerated excitement, with unmistakable respect. "The usual table has been prepared, sir." "Thank you." As they were escorted inside, Harper noticed the staff moving with unusual efficiency. Orders appeared almost instantly. The chef even stepped out of the kitchen to personally greet Damian before disappearing again. When their meal ended, Harper quietly leaned across the table. "I'm beginning to think you own half this city." "I don't." "The smaller half?" A genuine smile escaped him. "You have an active imagination." "I own a flower shop." She pointed toward him. "You, however, seem to own invisible influence." He looked out across the river instead of answering. Not because he wanted to deceive her, but because telling the truth would change everything. And for the first time in many years, there was one place in the city where Damian Vale wasn't treated like a chairman, or feared like a king. He was simply Damian, the quiet man who asked too many questions about flowers, the man who accidentally bought a cactus, the man who was slowly remembering what ordinary happiness felt like. He wasn't ready to lose that, so he let the silence answer for him. Harper noticed. She smiled gently. "You don't have to tell me. When you're ready, I'll listen." For the first time in a very long time, someone had offered him patience instead of demanding answers, and somehow, that simple gift felt more valuable than everything his power had ever bought. The city's annual Winter Lights Charity Gala was unlike any event Harper had ever attended. She had no intention of going. Elegant galas, designer gowns, and champagne receptions belonged to a world that had never felt like hers. But 2 weeks earlier, the foundation organizing the event had purchased every floral arrangement from her little shop. The coordinator had smiled warmly and insisted, "You designed the room. You deserve to see it." So Harper accepted. She wore the only evening dress she owned, a deep emerald gown that flowed comfortably around her curves. She styled her hair in loose waves, added a pair of silver earrings inherited from her grandmother, and reminded herself she was there as a florist, nothing more. When she entered the ballroom, conversations drifted around crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. For a brief moment, she felt out of place. Then she spotted Damian. He crossed the room to greet her, with the same quiet expression he always wore. "You came. You sound surprised. I hoped you would." She smiled. "I couldn't miss seeing what my flowers looked like after professionals arranged them. They looked beautiful before anyone touched them." The compliment was simple, sincere. It warmed her far more than she expected. They spoke only a few minutes before Damian was called away by several business leaders. Harper encouraged him with a playful wave. "Go, be mysteriously important." His lips curved faintly. "I'll try." Left alone, Harper wandered toward the floral displays, quietly adjusting a rose that had tilted sideways. "You have quite the audience." The unfamiliar voice carried effortless confidence. Harper turned to see a striking blonde woman in an elegant ivory gown. Every movement radiated practiced sophistication.
"I'm sorry?"
"I'm Vanessa Rowe." She extended a hand. "I organize luxury events." Harper shook it politely. "Harper Ellison." "I know." Vanessa's smile remained flawless. "So, you're the florist." "I am. The famous florist." Harper blinked. "I don't think famous is the right word." "No?" Vanessa lifted a champagne glass. "People have been talking. About the flowers?" A soft laugh escaped Vanessa. "Oh, sweetheart. No. They're talking about the woman who kissed Damian Vale in the middle of the street." Several nearby guests grew noticeably quieter. Harper immediately understood. This conversation was no longer private. "It wasn't what it sounded like," she answered calmly. "I'm sure." Vanessa nodded with exaggerated sympathy. "Accidents happen. Some women trip. Some women accidentally end up attached to billionaires." Harper remained silent. Vanessa continued. "You know, society has always loved romantic stories. The ordinary woman, the powerful man, one impulsive kiss, and suddenly everyone believes in destiny." Harper looked directly into her eyes. "It wasn't destiny." "No? No. It was raining." For the first time, Vanessa's smile stiffened. Harper continued gently. "I thought someone was about to get hurt. So I helped. That's all." Vanessa took another sip of champagne. "If that's what helps you sleep." Harper recognized the invitation. An argument. A public scene. Exactly the kind of gossip tomorrow's guests would enjoy repeating. She refused to give anyone that satisfaction. "I hope you enjoy the evening." She smiled politely. "Excuse me." Without another word, Harper walked away. Her shoulders remained straight. Her pace never quickened. Only after reaching the quiet terrace overlooking the city did she allow herself to exhale. She wasn't embarrassed, only saddened. She had never imagined a single impulsive decision could become entertainment for strangers. Inside the ballroom, Damian had witnessed everything. He had been speaking with investors only a few yards away. Every sentence, every insinuation, every carefully disguised insult. He had heard them all. Lucas stepped closer. "Should I have security remove Miss Rowe?" Damian's expression remained unreadable. "No." Miss Ellison handled herself with more dignity than anyone else in that conversation. He looked through the glass doors toward the terrace, where Harper stood alone beneath the evening lights. She hadn't defended herself with anger. She hadn't tried to impress anyone. She had simply walked away. That quiet strength affected him far more deeply than outrage ever could. Moments later, Margaret Vale approached her son. She had observed the exchange from another corner of the ballroom. "You care about her." It wasn't a question. Damian remained silent. Margaret smiled knowingly. You've introduced me to diplomats, judges, prime ministers. But I've never seen you watch anyone the way you watch that young woman. He followed Harper with his eyes. I don't want this world hurting her. His mother rested a gentle hand on his arm. My dear, the danger isn't that she'll change your world. She glanced toward the terrace. It's that your world may not deserve someone like her. For the first time that evening, Damian realized his greatest fear wasn't that Harper would discover who he truly was. It was that once she did, the kindness that had brought her into his life might quietly walk away forever. The first sign that something had changed came on a quiet Monday morning. Harper unlocked the front door of her flower shop just after sunrise, humming softly as she arranged fresh peonies in the display window. The familiar routine usually filled her with peace. Flowers never demanded explanations. They simply bloomed wherever kindness and patience allowed them to. That morning, however, the peaceful rhythm felt strangely fragile. Across the street, a black SUV remained parked, with its engine idling. She noticed it, then dismissed it. People parked everywhere in the city. There was no reason to imagine anything unusual. Near closing time, the bell above the door rang. 3 men entered. They wore expensive coats instead of leather jackets. Their voices were calm instead of aggressive. Yet Harper immediately recognized something unsettling. It wasn't their appearance. It was the way they quietly spread through the shop, casually blocking the entrance without seeming to. The tallest man smiled. Miss Ellison? Yes. We only need a few minutes. Harper carefully placed the bouquet she had been wrapping onto the counter. If this is about flowers, you've come to the right place. One of the men gave a short laugh. Not flowers. Mr. Damian. Her smile faded only slightly. What about him? We understand you've become friendly. We've had coffee. We've talked. I sell him flowers. The tallest man nodded. Exactly. So perhaps he's shared something with you. Harper frowned. I don't know what you mean. He told you why people were looking for him that night. No? He trusted you. No. The man stepped a little closer. Miss Ellison, I think you do know. Harper met his gaze without lowering hers. I don't. I still don't even know why those men chased him. The answer was simple, truthful. She had expected honesty to end the conversation. Instead, the room became even quieter. The tallest man rested one hand lightly on the counter. No one risks kissing a complete stranger unless there's more to the story. Harper almost smiled. You've obviously never met impulsive people. We exist. He studied her face, searching for hesitation. He found none, only quiet sincerity. That unsettled him more than any practiced lie could have. So you're saying, you truly know nothing. I know he likes blue irises. The men exchanged puzzled glances. Harper continued earnestly. And he once bought a cactus because he thought it looked resilient. Another confused silence. He also has terrible taste in choosing flowers without help. The tallest man blinked. You expect us to believe that's all you know? It is. She folded her arms. I've never asked him questions he wasn't ready to answer. And he never volunteered. The front door opened again. No one heard the bell. Every eye instinctively turned toward the entrance. Damian walked inside. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. He carried no visible weapon. His expression remained as calm as ever. Yet the atmosphere inside the shop changed instantly. The 3 men straightened almost unconsciously. The tallest one lowered his hand from the counter. Mr. Vale, Damian's voice was quiet. You're frightening my friend. We meant no disrespect. Then leave. Only one word. No anger. No raised voice. No threat. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Finally, the tallest man inclined his head. Our mistake. He looked briefly toward Harper. "My apologies, Miss Ellison." Without another sentence, the three men walked out of the shop. The SUV disappeared less than a minute later. Harper waited until the street was completely empty before turning toward Damian. She let out one long breath. "Well, that was incredibly strange. I'm sorry." She waved the apology away. "I wasn't scared." "You weren't." "I was." She laughed. "But I refuse to let rude people know that." For a fleeting second, relief softened Damian's eyes. "You shouldn't have had to experience this." She leaned against the counter. "So, who exactly were they?" He hesitated. "People asking questions." "They seemed very interested in you." "They were." Harper studied him for a long moment. "You still don't want to tell me?" "No." Not because he didn't trust her. Because he did. Too much. If she knew the truth, she would become part of a world he had spent years trying to keep separate from everything good. She deserved mornings filled with roses and laughter, not whispered warnings and armed security. Harper nodded slowly. "All right." He looked surprised. "You're not angry? I don't have to know everything about someone to know whether they're kind." She smiled gently. "I've seen how you treat waiters. You remember birthdays. You thank delivery drivers. You buy flowers for hospital nurses. Whatever you're hiding, those things are real too." The words landed with unexpected force. For years, people had measured Damian by reputation, by influence, by fear. Harper measured him by ordinary acts of kindness. She judged the man, not the mystery surrounding him. He realized with uncomfortable clarity that protecting her by remaining silent was becoming impossible. The longer he waited, the more he risked betraying the very trust she continued to place in him without question. As he prepared to leave, Harper called after him. "Damian?" He turned. "If you ever decide to tell me the whole story." She smiled with the same warmth she had shown the night they met. "I promise I'll listen before I judge." He held her gaze for several quiet seconds. Then he gave a small nod. For the first time since that rainy evening, he knew the truth could not remain hidden much longer. For 3 days after the incident at the flower shop, Damian stayed away. Not because he wanted distance, because every instinct he possessed warned him that the life he had built was finally colliding with the life he wished he could have. Each morning he found himself looking toward Harper's Street from the back seat of his car. Each afternoon he nearly instructed Lucas to stop outside the flower shop. Each time, he told the driver to keep going. If he continued hiding the truth, he would eventually betray the one person who had trusted him without asking for proof. If he revealed everything, he might lose her forever. Harper noticed his absence immediately. She told herself not to. People had busy lives. Successful businessmen traveled. Meetings happened. Still, every time the little brass bell above the shop door rang, she instinctively looked up. Every evening, she caught herself wondering whether he had finally decided he no longer needed excuses to buy flowers. She laughed at herself, then quietly arranged another bouquet. On the 4th evening, just as she was locking the shop, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Harper." She turned. Damian stood beneath the fading sunset, his hands in the pockets of his dark overcoat. He looked more tired than she had ever seen him. "You disappeared." "I know." "I was beginning to think you'd learned enough about flowers." "I haven't." She smiled softly. "Good. There are still hundreds left." He hesitated before speaking again. "Would you walk with me?" They wandered slowly through the city park. Autumn leaves drifted across quiet pathways, while families packed up late picnics and children chased one another across the grass. It felt wonderfully ordinary. Perhaps that was why Damian chose this place. He wanted the truth to arrive somewhere peaceful, not surrounded by bodyguards, not inside one of his offices. Just two people walking together. After several silent minutes, he stopped beside the lake. "I've lied to you." Harper looked at him calmly. "No. You've hidden things. That's different." He lowered his eyes. "My last name is Vale." She nodded. "I figured that out after the gala." "You did. It's difficult not to notice when half the city calls you Mr. Vale." A faint smile almost appeared, then disappeared again. "There's more." She waited, patiently, exactly as she had promised. "I am chairman of Vale International. I know." And he drew one slow breath. "There is another side of my life. There is another side of my life. The one those men were asking about." She said nothing. He continued. "I lead an organization that people fear. Most newspapers would call it organized crime. Others would call it a mafia family. I don't deny either description." The breeze rippled across the lake. For the first time in years, Damian felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not fear of rivals. Not fear of betrayal. Fear of one woman quietly stepping away. He forced himself to finish. "The night you kissed me, the men confronting me weren't random criminals. They worked for Adrian Cross. They mistook me for someone vulnerable. They were wrong. I've spent years building a reputation strong enough that people fear speaking my name." He looked directly at her. "You were the only person who didn't." Silence settled between them, long enough for distant church bells to echo across the water. Harper stared at him. Then, to Damian's complete astonishment, she laughed, not mockingly, not nervously, a genuine laugh. He blinked. "You are laughing. I'm sorry." She covered her mouth, still smiling. "I just realized something." "What?" She stepped closer. "So that's why everyone acts so strangely around you." He frowned slightly. "You aren't frightened. I should probably be asking different questions." "Like what?" She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Have you been secretly buying flowers just to have conversations with me?" For the first time in decades, Damian forgot every carefully rehearsed sentence. I suppose I have." She smiled wider. "I knew it." He stared at her in disbelief. "Harper, did you hear anything I just said?" "I did." "And?" She reached out and gently took his hand, the same hand she had shaken months earlier after pretending to be his wife. This time, she didn't let go. "Good." He searched her face, unable to understand. "Good?" She nodded. "Because I kissed the man." She squeezed his hand lightly. Not the title. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in his chest. She continued before he could speak. "When I met you, I didn't know your last name. I didn't know how much money you had. I certainly didn't know people feared you. I only knew one thing. You looked alone." Her voice softened. "And lonely people deserve kindness too." Damian closed his eyes for a brief moment. Years of discipline, years of emotional restraint, years of teaching himself never to reveal weakness. All of it became suddenly fragile beneath the weight of one simple truth. She had never fallen for power. She had simply cared about a stranger. When he opened his eyes again, they were brighter than before. "I don't deserve your trust." "No," Harper answered gently. "You deserve the chance to keep earning it." For several quiet seconds, neither of them spoke. The city continued around them. Cars passed. Leaves drifted. Life moved forward. And for the first time since becoming the city's most feared man, Damian Vale felt something infinitely stronger than fear. He felt accepted. Not because of who he pretended to be, but because someone had finally chosen to see the man beneath every title. Winter quietly gave way to spring. The city changed almost without anyone noticing. Bare branches welcomed fresh green leaves. Sidewalk cafes filled again. The flower beds outside Harper's shop burst into color, and for the first time in months, she found herself leaving the front door open to let the warm breeze drift inside. Some things changed naturally. Others changed so gradually that neither Harper nor Damian realized they had crossed an invisible line. At first, they were simply friends. Then they became the first person each wanted to call after a good day, or a difficult one. Without discussing it, they began sharing pieces of ordinary life. Damian stopped by every Friday morning before work. Harper insisted he choose one flower without her help. His choices remained consistently terrible. You picked carnations with orchids. They looked compatible. They're arguing inside the bouquet. I don't hear anything. That's because flowers are polite. He smiled. I'll trust your expertise. You finally learned. I learned it's easier. Some evenings Damian helped close the shop. He swept the floor badly. Wrapped bouquets even worse. One afternoon, Harper watched him struggle with a ribbon for nearly 5 minutes. She finally stepped behind him. You're losing a fight against fabric. It appears so. Move. She gently took the ribbon from his hands. Standing so close, she noticed how carefully he always controlled every movement, as though years of responsibility had taught him never to relax completely. She finished the bow in seconds. There. Perfect. I couldn't have done that. I know. He looked at her with mock offense. That wasn't encouraging. She laughed. It was honest. I thought honesty was one of your favorite qualities. It is. Unfortunately for you. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Neither stepped away. Neither seemed to notice how close they had become. The little bell above the door rang, startling them apart. An elderly customer entered with an amused smile. I hope I'm not interrupting. Harper nearly dropped the scissors she was holding. We were discussing ribbon. The woman glanced at Damian. Of course you were. After she left with her bouquet, Harper covered her face. She definitely didn't believe us. No, Damian answered calmly. I don't think she did. Their friendship also brought Damian back into parts of life he had long forgotten. One Sunday afternoon, Harper convinced him to help at a neighborhood gardening project for children. No executives. No bodyguards standing nearby. Just families planting flowers in a public park. At first, the children stared at Damian's serious expression. Then one little boy walked up, holding a tiny watering can. Mister, you forgot to smile. Harper bit her lip to stop herself from laughing. Damian looked genuinely confused. I did? My grandma says flowers grow better when people smile. Damian glanced toward Harper. She nodded, solemnly. Scientifically proven. It is? No. But don't ruin the story. To everyone's astonishment, Damian smiled. The little boy grinned triumphantly. There! Now they'll grow. Harper watched the exchange quietly. For years, the world had seen only the man people feared. She was beginning to see the man he might have become if life had offered him gentleness much earlier. That evening, they sat together on a bench overlooking the river. Neither spoke for several minutes. The silence between them had become comfortable. Not empty. Peaceful. Damian broke it first. I've been thinking about something. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. She smiled. What is it? He looked across the water before finally turning toward her. Would you still have kissed me if you had known who I was? Harper pretended to consider the question very seriously. She tapped one finger against her chin. I don't think so. For one brief heartbeat. His expression fell. Then she laughed. Not for the reason you're imagining. He looked at her expectantly. I would have been far too nervous. She shook her head with a grin. If I'd known you were the terrifying Damian Vale, I probably would have hidden behind a parked car instead. A genuine laugh escaped him. So my reputation would have ruined everything. Absolutely. She pointed at him. You would have looked much less approachable. I wasn't approachable. No, you really weren't. They laughed together until neither could remember who had started. When the laughter faded, Harper reached for his hand. This time, it felt natural. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just quiet certainty. I don't regret that night. Neither do I. He intertwined his fingers with hers. The gesture was small, yet it carried more meaning than any grand declaration, because neither of them had fallen in love in a single dramatic moment. Love had arrived one ordinary conversation at a time, one bouquet, one shared laugh, one quiet act of trust. By the time either of them recognized it, it had already become impossible to imagine life without the other. And somewhere, beneath the fading light of another peaceful evening, the stranger Harper had once kissed to save his life finally found a place where he no longer needed to hide his heart. 1 year later, the Grand Hope Charity Gala filled the city's historic concert hall with music, laughter, and generosity. Unlike the previous year, Harper no longer felt like she didn't belong. She still owned the same neighborhood flower shop. She still laughed too loudly. She still wore comfortable shoes whenever she could. The only difference was that she no longer walked into the room alone. Damian stood beside her. Not as the city's most influential businessman. Not as the man people whispered about behind closed doors. Simply as the man who instinctively reached for her hand the moment they stepped inside. Margaret Vale watched them from across the ballroom and smiled quietly. She had recognized long ago what Damian himself had been too guarded to admit. Harper had not changed who her son was. She had simply reminded him who he had always been beneath the weight of power. Later that evening, after the charity auction concluded, several journalists gathered near the stage to interview the evening's guests. One young reporter smiled at Harper. "Miss Ellison, may I ask one question?" "Of course. I think everyone knows the story of how you and Mr. Vale first met." A ripple of amused laughter spread through the audience. The reporter continued. "Would you say your first kiss was romantic?" Harper looked toward Damian before laughing. Not even a little. More laughter followed. "I honestly thought I was saving a complete stranger." The reporter turned to Damian. "And what did you think?" Damian looked at Harper for several quiet seconds before answering. His voice remained calm, but this time, everyone could hear the warmth behind it. She was. The room fell silent. "I was a stranger." He gently intertwined his fingers with Harper's. She looked up at him with the same smile that had once convinced 3 dangerous men to walk away. "You just didn't know." He paused briefly. That stranger needed saving more than anyone. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then applause filled the ballroom. Not because of wealth, not because of influence, but because everyone understood the truth hidden inside those simple words. Sometimes the strongest people carried the deepest loneliness. Sometimes courage appeared in the form of one impulsive act of kindness. And sometimes, the smallest decision changed 2 lives forever. Harper looked at Damian with playful affection. "So, should we make our marriage official this time?" He laughed. "I was hoping you'd ask." She smiled. "Good, because pretending to be your wife for a year has been exhausting." The audience laughed again. Damian leaned forward. "This kiss," he whispered softly enough that only she could hear, "doesn't need an excuse." He kissed her gently. Not to escape danger, not to fool anyone, not because fate demanded it, but because love had quietly grown between 2 ordinary conversations, 1,000 shared smiles, and one unforgettable rainy evening when a warm-hearted florist chose kindness before fear. As applause echoed through the hall, Harper realized that the stranger she had once rushed to save had given her something just as precious in return. a love built not on power or reputation, but on trust, on courage, and on the beautiful truth that the greatest miracles often begin with one completely unexpected kiss.